Hey everybody, it's Mike. All right, so I want to answer some more questions. By the way, I really appreciate the comments and the questions left in the comments section of the video because it really helps me. It's helpful for me because it reminds me. It helps me go back and work through maybe some things that I just had forgotten about. Um, but I think it's helpful for all of us to have this discussion. What's interesting is that, the questions that people are asking are, I think, questions that they just carry with them because they're so painful and there's so much confusion behind them, and you can't really ask anybody else. The only person that you can ask is the borderline or somebody who represents some kind of understanding about the borderline. So if you're new to the channel, this is a channel for non-borderlines who have been in a relationship with people who have the mental illness of borderline personality disorder. I am not a borderline. I am a codependent. I was in a relationship. I no longer am. I'm currently in a state of recovery and have been no contact for almost 6 months now. And so if any borderlines do come onto the channel, bear in mind that I am not a borderline. So while I may talk authoritatively about what the borderline is thinking or doing, it's really more of a way of communicating to non-borderlines who are trying to understand, trying to cope, and trying to get their strength and their healing back. One of the ways, if you are a borderline, that you can perhaps benefit from this channel is to understand what it's like for people who are on the other end of your mental illness. And your mental illness you are a victim of as well. And I am aware that you suffer greatly. And as a result, everybody in your life ends up suffering. Or people that end up trying to get close to you. This is the sad part. So if everybody listening to me, I'm going to recommend everybody get into some kind of therapy or recovery work in order to heal and to have the life that you want. All right, so the most vexing question, probably is a bunch of most vexing questions, but right now the most vexing question that the codependent or the empath, the partner to the borderline, feels is the question of, did they really love me? How did they really feel about me? Because their behavior when they split is usually really, really, really confusing, because it will come right after you have connected with them and actually created some real love and intimacy. And that's when the attacks come, or the ghosting, or the, however it is these people split and discard you. So that's a really good question. But let me ask you this question. You remember that one night stand you had 5 years ago? Do you think about how did that person really feel about you? Did they really love you? Did they really enjoy the sex? How about when you're driving down the street and that person cut you off and flipped you off? Do you think about, what did that person really love me? Why did that person do that? What was their motivation? What were they really thinking? How did they really see me? What did they really think about me? No, you don't think like that. So think about the question, did they really love me? Think about that question. The way you know if somebody really loves you is how they treat you. If somebody is there for you, if you can depend on them, if they are there when you need them, if they respond to your need positively, if they allow you to love them and take care of them, if there is consistency in what they say they're going to do and what they do, when they do things for you when they don't want to do it, those are signs of love. What has the borderline in your life done? They've probably done things that do not equate with love at all. So the practical answer to your question is no. Because love is not a feeling. Love is an action. I remember telling this to my borderline ex when, I don't know, we hadn't completely, I think we were early on in the process, but the topic of love came up, and I said, I don't remember what the context was, but I said, love is not a feeling, love is an action. And she looked at me like this, like, what? What does that mean? What do you mean? I said, well, it's great when somebody has a squishy feeling for you, but it doesn't mean anything. Ultimately, the only thing that matters is what you do for somebody. And if you have a squishy feeling behind it, all the better. But, people don't care what you feel. People care what you do. People care about the actions and the consequences of your actions on them. That's what makes them grateful. When you do something that benefits them, that they couldn't have done for themselves, and you give them or do something for them, the positive impact on that makes a feeling of gratitude and creates a feeling of trust and safety and love, and they love you back. So people don't care how you feel. This is, again, we're talking about borderline personality disorder, where the damage that was caused to the borderline was, around this age, probably even much younger than that. Could have been as early as 2 or 3 months old. Whatever the trauma was, they were discarded, they were abandoned, they were abused, they were shamed, they were yelled at, they were given some message where they were not loved, and in actuality, the love was never given to them. That's where they live. That broke something in them, and that's where they stay. They end up getting these adult bodies with these adult brains and adult vocabularies, but in terms of the part of them that connects and attaches emotionally to real intimacy and can love, this is what's happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is the internal reality for them. It's horrible. I chose this picture for a reason, because it just slays me every time I see it. And it represents both the borderline and the codependent, because what the borderline does is the borderline in a way that nobody else can do. No other, not an alcoholic or a drug addict or, somebody who's got, whatever their issues are. They might be really, really, really messed up and might be incapable of love and all that. But nobody can do in as geniusly, is that even a word? As masterfully as the borderline. Nobody can get you to that place better than the borderline. And that's why we seek them out. We seek them out because we have that also. There's a core experience that we have, that is that little baby. Who, by the way, the reason why she's crying is because you haven't subscribed yet. So just lovingly, scroll over her face and subscribe, and she'll stop crying. So, what was I talking about? So, I don't remember what I'm talking about. The point of the question is, did they really love you? Does anybody in that state have the ability to love? Not while they're in that state. This is why borderlines, it is so important that you get help, you get therapy. Because you got to find a way to stop the crying baby inside you. You got to find a way to stop that little baby from scream crying at the world. Because that's all that happens. People come into your life, they try to love you, and then you feel this, and all you know is that everybody hates you and they're trying to get rid of you, and everybody's going to discard you. It's because you're still there. You haven't left that place. You get, time broke and it stopped and you're still there. And so when somebody comes along and gives you what it is that you want the most, the only thing you know when you get to the real core of yourself, which is, by the way, what true intimacy creates. True intimacy will bring you to the state of who you really are underneath it all. If you are somebody who is full of love, then intimacy will create a desire for you to give love. If you're full of strength, if you're full of confidence, if you're full of happiness, joy, spirituality, when you experience true intimacy, what will be stimulated for you to give the other person is all of those things. If what is at the core of your being is fear, distrust, and I'm not judging, there's a reason for it, pain, unresolved trauma, unresolved mourning, loss, then when true intimacy strikes, that's what's going to come to the surface. Now, the difference between the borderline and the non-borderline is the borderline, because they are, emotionally arrested at 2 months old or 3 months old or whatever it is, they don't have any reserve to tap into. Everybody else, if they've got their core trauma that happened at different ages, I would say mine probably happened at age 4. So I've got 4 years of reserve. So that means when somebody really truly loves me, and we're not in some codependent dance, and somebody really truly honestly loves me, this comes up in me also. But I also have enough to reach back and go, wow, I am so afraid. And instead of, I've had my borderline, my splitting issues as well. We all have, where I've run away from true love, or I've run away from responsibility or commitment, or, I've done no shortage of that as well in my life. But, when I met the woman who was the woman of my dreams, who sadly is no longer with us, but when I found that, there was a point where she was there. She was loving me. And I started doing my thing and, acting on my borderline tendencies. And I don't remember what it was that she said, but she stopped and said something to the effect of, do you not want to be in this relationship? Because, something's up. Are you all right? And I had to go and listen to myself and realize, wow, this is just me. I'm afraid of intimacy. And then I went to her and I said, I'm really afraid. I'm scared. And I cried, and I healed some of that unresolved scream crying that was left inside of me. And that's what is supposed to happen. And, everybody's on a different scale, but, borderline personality disorder is a very specific thing that I had whatever I had in me, I had enough reserve to dig back in and pull it out and do the opposite of what all of my, my little 4-year-old hurt self was wanting to do, which was run away or scream and yell. And I was able to stay and work through it and heal that. Borderlines don't have that. They just don't have anything to draw from. And if you listen to the people who are on here and you listen to them talk about it, they are aware in hindsight what's going on. As I understand, sometimes they're aware in the moment that they are responding. They can hear themselves do it. They see themselves like watching a movie, but they can't stop. It's because there's nothing for them. There's no strength to fall back on and pull forward and act contrary. They just don't have it. So they really have to learn. And if they can, I understand that it's possible to heal and grow from that. But I also understand it's very challenging for them. So the question of did they really love you is like asking, does this little you're wanting to have a full-blown, romantic, intimate, deep connection that requires responsibility and commitment from this. It's just, imagine looking at that face as she's scream crying at you and saying, why don't you love me? Why won't you be there for me? Why can't I depend on you? You said you were going to do this, 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 and this, and you don't do it. Why are you doing this? I don't deserve this. And all you're going to hear is the scream crying coming at you. That's all they have. So the answer to the question is, did they really love you? Is no. Did they have honest, sincere feelings for you? Yes. If they didn't, then we'd be talking about narcissists, which I'm not an expert in that, but my understanding is that we're talking about somebody who's full-blown psychopathic or sociopathic. And my experience with borderlines is that they're not 100% psychopathic or sociopathic. They have some sociopathic tendencies, and not all borderlines are the same. But the woman I was with, there was a sociopathic disconnect from a lot of the things that she did. And while she looked me in the face and, when I recounted to her some things that happened during a 3-month period, or excuse me, a 3-week period that she didn't remember, because she didn't remember it, there was no emotional connection, and she went, it didn't faze her. She didn't have any guilt, she didn't have any remorse, and she felt no need to repair that damage. And but there wasn't any other negative feeling. It was just, well, sorry that happened to you. That was it. So what you're asking for is understandable, because when the borderline idealizes you, when they, quote, love bomb you, it's not that their feelings are insincere. They're sincere. I can't tell you what their motives are. I assume it was that there's a mix. I assume that depending on the situation and depending on the individual, that there are times when they honestly feel really good about being loving towards you and kind towards you, and they probably mean everything they say when they say, we're going to get married and I'm going to do this for you and I will be that for you. And the list of all the promises that were given to me, were really amazing. Of course, absolutely zero of them were fulfilled, but I don't believe that she had any intention to not fulfill it. I think in that moment she thought she was going to be able to do it. We could debate whether or not it was coming from, idealization, and whether or not it was just superficial, her playing a game, or whether, she actually meant it, and that wasn't enough because, when push comes to shove, she just didn't have it in her. She may have wanted to, she just couldn't have. Because again, it's a mental illness. It means there's something broken. So you have to understand that if you're a codependent. So let me take a look at some comments. I love responding to comments. So let's see here. This person says, I'm going to try and find, it goes a lot of sharing of experience, which, by the way, that's why it's, it's good to go to places like Codependence Anonymous, which I'm sure they have online meetings. So you can go and, use Zoom or something like that to be a part of those meetings and listen and share. It's really important to share. I did it. And I recommend you do it as well. It's great to share on here too, but you need to share like with a living face that can hear and, respond back to you. Let's see. Part of this video, I'm quoting now, part of this video that I find interesting and I hope you'll expand upon more in the future deals with BPD's fear of a relationship that often results in a rejecting rage right after closeness. So let's be clear about that. There's all different kinds of borderlines. There are, your typical borderline that rages. So when they split, when the intimacy hits them, and then their brain, kicks in trying to protect them and tells them absolute, total, utter craziness that is not at all connected to reality about what you're doing and what you're feeling and what you're intending for them. They get back here, bonk, then they yell and scream and call you names and they rage. The woman I was with was probably what they would call a quiet borderline. She didn't rage. She would, she did have a couple of moments where she did, turn on me and say and do some things very aggressively, but that was very rare. Most of the time she would split and then she would just, smash it down and, go and say, I need to go and meditate. She'd go meditate for 4 hours and come out and not be doing very well. Or she would, become very depressed and, not get out of bed, or, and refuse to talk to anybody, not respond to any communications from anybody. Or, there would be closeness and then, and everything would be wonderful and there'd be this talk of we're the most amazing. And then I would get the next day, I would get some text or some, something. So she didn't do that. Yours, whoever this is talking about raging. That's only one way that they split. But bear in mind, whether they are raging or whether they are, intellectually getting rid of you, or whether they're just disappearing or whatever it is, what's really happening is this. That's the thing. And unfortunately, there's no way for you to console that. That baby, when they're splitting, is inconsolable. There's nothing you can say or do. You have to understand that. There's really nothing you can do for them. All right, so we'll expand more on the future. More in future deals with BPD's fear of a relationship that often results in a rejecting rage right after closeness. That's what he wants me to talk about, or she, whoever it is. With each of the BPDs I was involved with, so this person has had more than one, I still have questions of whether they ever really, quote, loved me. My first BPD would devalue me, parentheses, tell me I was less than other lovers. Tell me she didn't love me the way I loved her, which I now realize was true, and that she just wanted to be friends because she claimed she wasn't physically attracted to me. So, the thing is, you don't know what the truth of any of that is. You don't know how much of that is projection on her part. You don't know how much of that is defensive justification. You don't know, is she telling herself that? You don't know. All you know is that she is, she has her splitting, and she's doing the best that she can to try and come it together. She may not believe any of that either. Like when you say to people, well, I never liked you anyway. You say that to protect yourself. Little kids do that. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. The point is, those words don't mean anything. You're listening to her words as though they're coming from a well-adjusted, rational, emotionally healthy, centered person. And that's not what's happening. She has a mental illness. She doesn't know any more than you do, probably. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But my first BPD would devalue me, tell me I was less than other paramours. What is that? You don't know what that means. She might be saying that directly because she loved you more than them. Or that could be just what she does, or it could be just her doing her thing. When she's splitting, they can be very cruel. Could be anything. You're taking it like it means something. And that she just wanted to be friends because she claimed she wasn't physically attracted to me. As you can imagine, she withheld sexual intimacy. Well, the thing about that is that sexual intimacy, after, when they are idealizing you, then of course the sex is going to be great because they're having sex with their fantasy, which is not you either. It's a fantasy of what they want to have. But it doesn't mean that they see you at all. They're objectifying you. That happens in the beginning when, the first time anybody meets and has sex with anybody that just met, no matter, how healthy or unhealthy they are, that's the case. It's projection and transference and objectification, and it's hormones, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a hell of a lot of fun, but it doesn't mean that you're seeing the other person for who they are at all. But what you can expect is that if you're in a relationship with a borderline, they see you as the parent. They don't see you as equal or as an adult. They see you as the parent that is supposed to take care of this little person's needs. So you can imagine when the little baby is getting what they need, they're very happy. And when the little baby is not getting what they need, then they're very unhappy. So what will happen is that after the initial, and again, they're all different. I can't speak for all of them. My experience was that with the woman that I was with is that the first idealization phase was the pinnacle. And after, these micro splits, because they're micro splitting all the time. That's my experience. It's not that they're like 100% in love with you all the time. Even when things are great, they're constantly splitting and then trying to repair it and split it. They're trying to keep the fantasy up because that's their savior. So they don't want to lose it. They don't want to lose you. They don't want to stop idealizing you. That doesn't serve them. So, but because it's just constantly going on in their mind, because they're like a broken record. Imagine, they get to this point, they break and it's broken. That record is constantly spinning all the time. So they're doing their best to try and keep that fantasy together. It starts to fall apart. That may be simply because you did something. You farted, you burped, you didn't say the right thing. You said something. Who knows what it is? It has nothing to do with you anyway. Whatever it was, fantasy falls apart. They project onto you. They split. And it may not be a huge split. It may not be I hate your guts. It may just be and you drop down a peg. They never get back to that original place. They try and put you back to that original place, but they never do. And they never can. And then what's going to end up happening is that you're going to end up, and then there'll be a big split, and then it'll bounce back, but it will never bounce back to where it was in the beginning, and then there comes a point where they just can't. They can't create the fantasy anymore because they now know you. They've spent enough time with you that they know you're a real person. And they know that you're imperfect and that you can never be that fantasy that they originally had. And what has never changed the whole time is that in their mind, in their unconscious mind, you have always been and will always be their parent. That's what's important. So who wants to have sex with their parent that's not giving them what they need? It's a disgusting feeling. Nobody wants that. That's why. That's why at the end, you're not the only person to say this. I've read this over and over again, that towards the end of the marriage or whatever it was, that my husband or my wife was disgusted at the thought of even touching me. That's because they know that you have this adult need for intimacy and sexuality, and they are coming to the realization on an unconscious level that you're not this fantasy, you're this parent that doesn't give them what they need. It's disgusting for them. You can't take any of it personally. You know, the girl I was with, the way she talked about all of her exes, at some point she would talk about how they reminded her of her dad. And then after we had split 2 or 3 times and things were, you know, we were trying to put things back together, then she would say, yeah, and I maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but you remind me of my dad. And I'm just like, I knew when I heard that, I went, oh, it's over. I've gone into the folder of, but it's because I knew enough about borderline personality disorder to know that what the borderline does continuously is see you as the parent. So the question that you ask, did they really love me? You're asking the question of, did they really love me like an adult equal loves another adult? The answer is no, they never did. They loved you like a little infant loves their parent when the parent is, giving them what they want, or when they think the parent has the potential to give them what they want. Okay? Does that make sense? This should help, because then you won't take it personally. I'm hoping that this helps the borderline as well, because it's important. It's sad that the girl I was with, the reason why she ultimately destroyed, devastated me in ways that no other human has ever done, or I don't think it could, unless I get back together with a borderline, which I will not do, God willing, and the creek don't rise, today anyway. I forgot what I was going to say. But you get where I'm going. Oh, what's sad is that, that's what destroyed it, was that I put the boundary of, I can't be in your life even as a friend unless you get, consistent help from a psychologist for borderline personality disorder. And that was so intolerable for her. She actually tried. She tried to commit to it. And then, of course, when the time came, she split on me and, used that as the reason why I'm the worst person that ever existed, because I'm calling her crazy and I'm trying to gaslight her and make her crazy when, I'm the one that has all the problems. And of course, ironically, had no idea that she was actually fulfilling the definition of borderline personality disorder, splitting in her reason for not wanting to be with me, and why she wasn't borderline. So my first BPD, this is me reading the comment here. My first BPD would devalue me, tell me I was less than other paramours, tell me she didn't love me the way I loved her, which I now realize was true. You don't know that she even knew what that meant. Maybe she was right. Maybe she could sense that something was different. Maybe she, who knows? You just can't take anything that they say when they're splitting you as meaning anything. It doesn't have any connection to objective reality. It is purely their own subjective reality, which is, only obeys the rules inside their own subjective narcissistic experience. We all have narcissistic experiences, so don't get mad. Borderlines, we're just talking about when even, when codependents are regressed, we go into our narcissism. Everybody does. So they're trapped in their narcissism, and there's no rhyme or reason to anything that's happening, and trying to make sense of it is insane. You're expecting more from them than they're capable of giving at that moment. She claims she wasn't physically, you can imagine, withheld sexual intimacy. All of this while begging me stay anytime I got hurt or exhausted, requesting she meet my needs or I'd need to leave. Which I ultimately did when she got involved with someone else, just to try to begin a triangulation that I was too smart and exhausted to engage in ultimately. Good for you. Question is, quote, did any of these people feel a connection with me? Well, of course they did. The connection was, what kind of connection do you want? Did it feel real to them? I'm sure it did. Did it feel like true love to them? I'm sure it did, just like it did to you. But If they truly, as I'm saying, weren't capable of having true love for you, then it is also true that as the codependent, you aren't capable of having true love for them. Because if you have true love for them, it means that when they exhibit all of the crazy stuff that they do, you would have the ability to objectively and unconditionally go, wow, this person's really broken and really damaged, and I obviously can't meet their needs. So forget about my needs for the moment. You know, me asking them to meet my needs is really selfish of me. The kindest thing I can do is not continue to create a false reality that they're going to keep hurting themselves over. Because the hurt isn't just on your end, borderline or codependent. They're also hurt. I mean, I'm sure that every time that, you know, a relationship falls apart, even if in their mind, they, you know, even if the objective reality is that out of the blue they are dumping you and crapping all over you and, you know, cheating on you and betraying you, in their mind, what's happened is that you did that to them, and they've lost the person that was supposed to heal them and take care of them. So it's horrible for them also. I'm not making excuses, bear in mind, I'm not making any excuses for their behavior. They are fully responsible for everything that they do. They are fully responsible for their own narcissistic craziness inside of them. The truth is that at any point in time, they could choose to make the decision to try and get better, and they could choose to make the decision to go get help when they realize they can't fix themselves. There is as much help available for them as there is for you, and all they need to do is acknowledge it and go after it. So while they are under the influence of a mental illness, which definitely gets in the way of their ability to see objective reality and act accordingly, it does not take away their responsibility. And the same is true for the codependent. At any point in time, the codependent can go, wow, this person has got some serious issues. This is obviously bad news for me and bad news for them. I can't see them anymore. But you keep going back. This is you choosing to override your every moment, the ability that you have to choose to recover. And that's true no matter how horrible you feel, borderline or non-borderline. No matter how horrible it is, you have the opportunity in every moment to stop and say, you know what, I'm going to choose to do the healthy thing for me right now. I'm going to choose to seek to get help. All right. Did any of these people feel a connection with me? Of course they did. They just didn't feel the same connection that you thought you were feeling for them. And or they may have felt the same connection that you did, but they're broken. They can't hold on to that connection. They can't attach. As psychologists would say, attachment disorder. I'm not even sure I know what that means, but it's definitely true. They don't have the ability. They may want to attach, but they can't. It's too slippery. There's nothing, they can't grab on. Did they feel a connection? Yeah. Could they maintain one? No. And is that why they pushed me away every time I felt like we were getting closer? Yes. But would not allow me ever to leave them? Yes. Because while they would push you away because they can't handle the intimacy and the responsibility and all the new, you know, because they're at here and they need to be here in order to have a real, you know, a mature connection. They can't go there. Doesn't mean that they don't want to. So of course they keep you around. Doesn't that make sense? Doesn't this little baby, even though mommy and daddy aren't loving her, doesn't she want more than anything to have them around? Of course she does. It's very sad. Let's see. FYI, the guy that came after me in my first BPD relationship has been married to that BPD woman for over 30 years. I've always sort of wondered how that's been for him. That's a really good quote right there, because let me just share what I think is true for a lot of codependents, which is when you've been discarded for somebody else, or even if you've been discarded and you don't know if there is somebody else, and you know there is going to be a somebody else, um, even, you know, regardless of whether you know or don't know, the feeling is that you were the bad one and they're finally going to find what they need in somebody else, and it's not you. And then they're going to give that person all of the juicy, good, loving, pure, wonderful, you know, love that you were wanting. Somebody else is going to get it. You know, in my case, she used to talk about a narcissist that she was with. Of course, she didn't use that word. This is me, you know, but somebody who just like tortured her and did all kinds of things. But of course, they had all kinds of crazy, intense sex, and I'd hear about all of the sex that they had, and I'm like, how come I'm not getting all that? Well, the reason I wasn't getting all that was because I wasn't a narcissistic abuser. Had I been, maybe, but she also, as I may have shared earlier, she was also able to completely destroy him in the end, you know, in a way that, you know, she just took him apart, completely, totally dismantled him, and then discarded him. So she wasn't that much of a victim, you know, when all was said and done. But I always thought about that, and I always thought, you know, all the love that he got that I didn't get, which of course never isn't the case at all. The truth is that there was all kinds of really crazy, toxic, you know, drug taking and violence and all kinds of other stuff that, of course, I didn't do. I was never that way with her. I never raged at her. You know, none of that stuff ever happened. So of course she didn't stay with me. I didn't keep her distant enough because I wasn't a narcissist. So I don't know anything about the guy that she's with. Maybe he's more screwed up than you and is able to keep the dynamic going because he's incapable of loving her. Maybe that's why she picked him. Maybe he's, you know, he doesn't have the strength that you had, because you must have exhibited some strength in order for her to, you know, and some real love in order for her to devalue you and discard you. So maybe he doesn't have that, which makes him safer. I mean, does that mean that he's getting what you were wanting from her? Very unlikely. I just don't think it's possible. It's more than likely, if you were to talk to him, you'd find out that he's in tremendous hell. But we don't know. But it's so strange that we go there. But no, the reality is that if they did that with you, they're going to be like that in another relationship unless they get therapy. I've always sort of wondered how that's been for him. I'm assuming he's had his own codependent issues to wrestle with. I mean, is there any doubt about that? Little, if any, real intimacy, and endured tons of emotional abuse. 2, as I read that BPDs never really change. I'm still trying to understand the push side of these push-pull relationships better. Well, I hope I've explained it to you. The push is real simple. The push is the intimacy comes, which they do want. They're searching for it. They're masters of pulling it out of you. And then that triggers them to go back to their first experience where their needs were not met, and then they go here. And that's who's pushing you away. That's it. It's nothing more than that. If you're thinking about it and you're brooding over it, it's because you are understandably trying to project onto her rational, healthy, mature reactions to love and intimacy. And in that case, then the question is why? Why would she do that? Why would anybody treat me that way? Well, somebody who was mature and healthy and rational would not do that. Somebody who is broken and has a mental illness and is in their mind, they believe you are doing this to them. That's why they're acting the way that they act. It's got nothing to do with you. That's your insanity. Your insanity is to think that, you know, that you did something wrong. And the reason why it's you believe that you did something wrong is because the borderline represents the ultimate um, denial and rejection that you experienced from your parents, your mother and or your father. If you're, if you're like me, it was your mother. Um, that it represents that feeling. I'll share an experience that I had. When my borderline started splitting on me, the first couple of splits, and then like discarding me and going no contact for a couple weeks at a time. I went into this place where there was this hell inside of me, and I had this hole in my gut that felt like a black hole, and it felt like physically I could feel it, and it was really, really horrible and painful, and I was really worried for my physical health as well as my mental and emotional health. I didn't know who I was or what I was doing. I didn't have any sense of anything. My business, fell apart. My whole life I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know who I was. It was very unlike me. And so I did what I know how to do, and I listened to the feeling and I went into it. And it reminded me of an experience I had when I was a kid. When I was a kid, up until I was about 16 or 17, every time that I got a flu and got a fever, I would get like this really intense fever, and then my fever would break, and then I would hallucinate. I'd get whatever that is, when you're sick and your fever is too high and your fever breaks. I would hallucinate. And this one time, I was sick, and I had fallen asleep on a couch, and there were two couches next to each other. My mother was sleeping on one couch. My mother wasn't like horrific in every way. I mean, she took care of me when I was sick, whatever else. She was overprotective. So yeah, I'm thinking about it now, it was a great way to keep me hostage so she could take care of me. But, and so she's on one couch and I'm on the other, and I fall asleep, and she fell asleep, and I woke up, my fever broke, and I woke up and I was delirious. And in the space between the couches was this black hole. And it was the most horrible feeling. And this feeling of my mother's right there. I can reach out and touch her, but the black hole is preventing it. And the feeling of never ever being able to connect to my mother. It was just a horrific feeling. And I've thought about that over the years, especially as I've gone into my own recovery. But in that moment, I realized that the feeling that I was having is that I was actually physically feeling that same feeling about this woman that I was with. And then it was like, oh my gosh, she's triggering all of my really the deepest unresolved, unsatisfied, need for my mother on her. And when I realized that, that it didn't stop the insanity, I wasn't able to snap my fingers and get out of it, but it was enough for me to realize I'm in deep, and I'm in some real serious codependent hell, and that I really need to get help. And it took me a while, but I had to sit myself down after that and say, I need help. And then I reached out to my therapist, and then I started reaching out to Codependence Anonymous, and I started doing the internal work to heal myself. I didn't get out. If you're still in your relationship with your borderline, I say get out now. But if you can't get out right away, I understand. It took me a while to get out. And to be honest, all that happened is that I set a boundary, and then she pushed me out. So in a sense, I did get myself out by taking the appropriate healthy action, even though she was the one that finalized it for me. So your need to wonder, does she love me? Did she ever feel a connection? That is you chasing after whoever it was in your childhood that didn't love you, and that you have that unresolved, there's no closure there, and you're trying to get it from this person who's completely incapable of giving you what you want. and you're constantly just out of reach, and there's this black hole between the two of you, and you can never, even though if they're 2 inches away, even if you're hugging them, you can never traverse that black hole to actually get to them and have them see you and touch you and give you the love you're looking for. And that's why we choose them, because there's something inside of you that is screaming for you to resolve it. So now that it's been stimulated and brought to your conscious awareness, which is the ideal here, this is how the universe works. If I can now put on my spiritual teacher cap, this is why your soul needed to work through some karmic issues, and you brought this person into your life. They have their own karmic reasons why their soul has chosen to incarnate as a person with borderline personality disorder. There's a very good chance that your souls, before incarnating, you went to them and said, hey, I've always had this mother thing that I've never really been truly able to get conscious of. So can you help? And that soul says, yes. In fact, I've got these issues about learning how to take responsibility for my needs, so I'm going to incarnate as a borderline. I'll be more than happy to push that button for you so that you can become conscious. These are all ways, I don't care if any of this is true. These are all ways that help me to make sense of it, to take action to go forward and heal myself. Okay, so let's see. Let's see what else. I'm looking at the comments here. All right, so I kind of agree with that. Somebody asked a good question, because I say what you should do is go to Codependence Anonymous. I say you should get help from a therapist and then go to Codependence Anonymous. And somebody asks, how do you do that? They found Codependence Anonymous, but it only mentioned the 12 steps. I don't know how to do it. So that's my fault. I just assumed that you'd know. So what you do is you go online and just type in Codependence Anonymous. I'm sure a bunch of things will come up, or in my area or in my city. And if you can get to an actual meeting with people, I would recommend doing that. If you can't do that because of the close down or the lockdown, then there's no doubt in my mind there will be online meetings, probably Zoom meetings or forum meetings or something. But there's all kinds of meetings out there. And whatever you do, just show up and say, I'm brand new. I don't know what, somebody suggested I come here and I don't know what the deal is. And then somebody will take your hand and help you. And then find somebody, and say, I need somebody to help me go through the steps. Just ask for help. And that's how it's done. Well, let's see, what else? Here's a good one. I'm still 1 month fresh out of my year-long BPD relationship, and I thought I was a special case. We all do. I mean, we all think that we're the only ones that have experienced this, and that's what makes you feel like you're going crazy, because you think, there must be something wrong with me, because it doesn't make any sense. That's the worst part about borderline. Trying to have a relationship with a borderline is that their actions, number one, their masterful ability to pull you in, to make you feel safe, to pull the intimacy out of you, and then to split on you when you feel the most safe and trusting, and to the reasons behind it and how masterful they are at gaslighting you into making you think it's your fault. It makes you feel like you're going crazy and you're the only one. And it's very, it's a borderline personality disorder is a mental illness that creates isolation in both parties. It just creates isolation. It's really awful. I thought I was a special case and could do some contact, I'm assuming after the fact. And even though every time I reached out, so you reached out to her after, that shows your insanity there. You're reaching out to somebody who has obviously abused you and rejected you in ways that somebody who truly cared about you or was capable of acting in a loving way. That's probably what I should say. Somebody who is capable of acting in a loving way wouldn't do, and yet you kept reaching out. That's called denial. You're not alone with that. That's denial. I certainly went through my share of that. Took everything I had in me not to reach out. After I made the decision, she first said she was going to go no contact, and then I'm hearing her talk about it. I realized no contact for her meant for a few weeks or a couple months or something, and then she was going to reach out again. And so I then said to her, nope, you're right. We need to this is the end for this lifetime. Please get rid of my phone, my Facebook. Please block me on every possible thing. And then I went and did exactly that, and I blocked her in every possible way that I could. I haven't heard from her. I don't know if she's tried or not. I don't care. But there were times when if I hadn't done that I would have. So I understand that. It's very normal. That's why it's really good to have, people and a therapist and, group like Codependence Anonymous, a group of people that you can call. When you want to call your ex, you call up somebody in Coda and you say, I'm about to call. It's like alcoholics. They call and say, I'm about to go drink. That's what it's there. That's why you do that. I was just realizing that those were the old phones. You remember the old phones? They had we don't have that. We have boxes. Let's see. Here's what's interesting. Thought I was a special case and could do some contact, even though every time I reached out, she made me regret it and hurt more. I still worry and feel guilt that I had a much larger role in destroying the relationship. I getcha. That is an induced feeling. So if you know anything about that, there's seduction and induction. Seduction is when you overtly say, wow, you're beautiful, I really want you. Or, you really ought to buy I'm going to seduce you into buying my product. Then there's induction, where a feeling is put into you that you're actually picking up from the other person. In this case, the induced feeling is that it's your fault, that you've damaged them, that you've abandoned them, that they need you. That's what's happening inside of the borderline. She's feeling that, and you are being induced with that feeling. And so it's a way of unconscious sort of energetic psychic manipulation, that you get induced with this feeling of that they are in pain and that they have been damaged, and you need to go and take care of them and help them and fix them, and it fits into your need to take care of them. And it's crazy making, because on the surface they've told you, I want nothing to do with you. You're the worst person that's ever existed. I'm walking away and I'm shutting off all contact. And then for some crazy reason, you start feeling like you hurt them, that you rejected them. I remember, because I went through that. And I remember after I had been discarded and, that she had broken off contact with me, I remember this very strong urge to reach out to her and apologize and reach out to her, because I couldn't escape the feeling that I had rejected her and that she was sad and alone because I had rejected her. Well, that's her unconscious projection that she's inducing into you, which is that, that's what, whenever they split, they're projecting on you. You hate me. You're doing this to me. And you're like, no, I'm not doing any of that. It's pure projection. They're projecting onto you what's going on inside of them. They induce that feeling within you, and then you start to feel like, oh my God, I rejected and hurt them. And I'd catch myself and I'd go, wait, I didn't. Why am I feeling guilty? She rejected me. I didn't reject her. The last thing I told her was that I love her and wanted to be with her for the rest of my life. And then she rejected me. Why am I feeling like I rejected her? So that's the combination of your your codependence being stimulated by her induced projected feeling of feeling rejected, and then you wanting to go and heal that. And that's what the insane cycle of, the mental illness, not the person, but their illness. So yeah, you didn't have any role in destroying the relationship. If you're the codependent, your role was you kept going back for more. How many times did they destroy it, and how many times did you keep going back? I still worry and feel guilt that I had a much larger role in destroying the relationship than I saw at the time, because hers was much more obvious. Right. I was wondering if you could talk about the role shame plays in codependence during and after the relationship. That would really help me. My inner critic has been on fire recently and has made feeling anything but shame and depression impossible. So one of the things that I do, I know this is a popular term, like in recovery circles, my inner critic, my inner child. The reason why I personally don't like those terms is because it creates a separation. The inner critic is you. It's not some other person or some other thing inside of you. The inner critic is you. So the real thing is to go deep into where that critic came from and why you do that, why you do that to yourself. Your experience is that somebody's doing it to you. My inner critic, and other programs that say my head. My head is telling me, but it's not something other than you, it's part of you. So the inner critic is created when you're a little kid in a dysfunctional home. And when, in my case, I'll give you one example in my case. My father was extremely successful, very successful in his field, like at the top of his field. And, but, he grew up in his own dysfunction. And so he still, no matter how successful he got it, never got rid of his insecurity. And he'd drink himself into a stupor because he felt so insecure. And if I was successful, even the least bit successful, he would find a way to ridicule me. And the other, my brother and my sister and my mother would also be induced, and they would attack me. And they would shame me for being successful. So I could have said my inner critic is shaming me, when I'm successful. But it was me. Because in order to get love from my father and also the other, cohorts in that craziness who were unconsciously acting out his, protecting his insecurity, in order to get their love and to be safe and to be accepted, I learned to start doing it to myself, so that whenever I started to be successful, guess what would happen? I would sabotage it before they could even start criticizing me. So your inner critic is you. You learn to criticize yourself whenever you are acting from your strength. So if your inner critic is screaming at you that it's your fault that the relationship ended and you caused all this damage, that's because you're replaying that need to placate your, whoever it was in your life, your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, whoever it was. And at the same time, your ex borderline has taken that role in your mind as well. So, it's what you really want to do is you're furious at them. You're furious at your mother, your father, the borderline, for not loving you, for abandoning you, for abusing you, for all those things. And instead of owning those feelings, you take that anger and you put it on yourself so that maybe they'll love you again. That's why you do that. So your inner critic is you. You do that. It's a choice that you made. It was a survival choice that no longer works. You can let it go and become honest about why you are doing that to yourself. My inner critic has been on fire recently, made me feel anything but shame and depression impossible. Shame and depression, I'll say this, depression can be healing. It means that you are now conscious. It can be. If you choose to turn it inward, it becomes depression. If you choose to stay conscious, it's pain, trauma, anger, sadness. And how sad is it that we didn't get the love we deserved? It's really sad. If we sit in that and allow ourselves to cry and mourn over that, we can heal. We can be for ourselves. What my teacher says is, my name is Mike, put a little mic on your chest. When you're screaming and yelling and why don't you stop and just put a little mic on your chest and just take care of it. Tell them it's okay. Say, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry that that happened to you. You didn't deserve that. Because that's what a real parent would do. So we didn't have that. So we need to do it to ourselves. We need to, when you want to rail at other people because there's an inner critic, which is what the borderline is doing, they're screaming and yelling at you the things that they think about themselves because there wasn't a parent who picked them up when they were crying and held them and said, it's okay, I'm here. They didn't have that. So the same with you. Does that make sense? Let's see, is there anything else? I think I've said a lot. People are asking for me to counsel them, and I haven't made a decision about that yet. 2 reasons. One is that I have a business that takes up all of the time that I'm willing to put into working with clients. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. So I think people are better served by going to qualified professionals. I definitely cannot work with borderlines. So if any borderlines, they haven't yet, but if they ask for my help, I certainly can't help them. I'm the wrong person to do that. But codependence, I don't know that, at this point, I'm not sure that it's a good idea. I think the best thing I can do for people is to continue to do this. So somebody reached out to me and is kind of insisting on wanting to talk to me. And the only way that I'll talk to anybody is in a professional setting. And I just don't have the time right now to take on new clients or start up a new practice. I'm already booked solid with my other one. So I'll keep revisiting that, but for right now, that's my feeling about that. And now we're back to the last video I made, which is somebody wanting me to know what it's like, how codependents see borderlines as a tasty treat. I already did that video. All right, so that's it. And again, that's the biggest question. The most difficult, and what this person is really saying is that they can't get any closure. And that's because there's no closure to be had. Closure assumes that you're dealing with somebody who's got rational, mature, functional thoughts and feelings and conclusions. Real closure is, yes, I really love you, but I've come to realize that you want to live in Chicago and have kids, and I've come to realize that I want to live in the mountains in the Himalayas, and I want to have a begging bowl, and I don't want that lifestyle. It's nothing personal. It's just, and then you go, oh, they want this and I want that. That makes sense. Oh, how sad, but now I have closure. Borderlines aren't going to give you closure because they don't have any closure. They don't have any, in fact, the essence of their mental illness is a lack of closure. They're still trying to figure out why mommy didn't hug them. They still haven't figured that out. How can they give you closure? You're not going to have closure with them. So you'll never figure it out. It's just going to be a hole. And if you heal yourself and are able to, look at your own reasons why you're chasing after somebody who can't give you what you need, and you get honest with the hole inside of yourself, you'll start to see as time goes on, oh my gosh, they were incapable. Of course they weren't giving me. They couldn't give me what I wanted. And then you can forgive them. You can let them go. Is there going to be ever any closure? No, the closest thing to closure I've gotten so far is when I think of her, I just go, I can't even imagine how, what we would do. I mean, how would I connect with her? Now that I know what I know about myself and about her, There's no crazy black hole gravity pulling us together. I feel pretty confident she's got to be feeling the same. I have no idea, and I don't need to know, but I'm willing to bet that she's moved on and has written me off. I'm in the file. I'm in the ex-boyfriend file, and I'm perfectly happy to be there because she's right. If her conclusion is that I never really loved her and I wasn't the right person for her, she's absolutely right. Because what I wanted from her was my own fantasy, that she could never have, she could never have played the role of my mother and fixed that hole in me that only my mother could have fixed. So she's absolutely right. I was asking the impossible, just like she was asking the impossible of me. Anyway, enough talking. I'm done. All right, guys, enough of the crying baby. By the way, if you want to get her to stop crying, very gently mouse over her crying little face and subscribe, and she will be so happy and she'll sleep like a baby. All right, that is it for me, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care.